Michael Irons, Worlds Old and New, by Nathan Moore. Chapter 19, Dry Respite. The valley was short and deep, more long than broad. It sloped steeper, but none could be considered cliffs. Despite this natural repository, it remained as dry as its surroundings. The knee-high grass parched, the collection of short, stocky trees long dead, their forms gnarled and bleached. So it was Michael Irons stood above the small valley, a silhouette against the cloudless, pale blue sky. There was no water he could see, no wildlife to replenish his rations, but still he stood, ice-blue eyes all but transfixed, as his mind considered investigation of the single incongruity. A small cabin. The structure was little more than a shack, poorly thrown together from wood so bleached and worn it blended well with the dead trees. Yet there it stood, its chimney producing smoke. Irons re-examined the western horizon. Sun would be half down within a few hours, and while this tiny valley looked parched and depleted, he doubted he would find better before nightfall. The index finger of his black-gloved right hand tapped thoughtfully on the grip of its corresponding flintlock pistol. At the very least, he would be able to satisfy this sense of unease he got from the cabin, one way or another. Over the next 20 minutes, Irons picked his way down into the valley toward the cabin, unhurried, a watchful eye ahead and around. He angled his approach somewhat in an effort to better observe the cabin, and so found the wall which held both a door and the only window. The door was built from a darker wood than the cabin, and the window's glass was clouded to the point of uselessness, though Irons felt he could discern the flicker of firelight and movement. He stopped some 50 feet from the door. "Hail the cabin," Irons called. He did not put a hand on firearm or sword. The movement inside the cabin stopped, then after a moment resumed with the sound of a quiet clatter. The cabin's door opened, revealing a stooped form that Irons was not able to readily identify. It seemed like a man, but may have been a woman. Age and life had not been kind. The person was hunched and worn, face and features tanned and wrinkled more than Irons thought possible, with long, thin, white locks of hair falling about to frame large, wide, almost impossibly black eyes. Clutched in the right hand was an aged and ill-kept cleaver. Now Irons had a hand on a firearm, though he did not draw. The person looked about as if Irons had not been seen, but then jolted to attention toward him with abrupt intensity. "No food!" The voice was indeed female, thin, reedy, scarcely composed, and the words were uttered in a matter-of-fact manner, almost in a staccato, as if shooing away a street urchin. "No food to share. All mine, just mine." The speech was strange, but the sentiment understandable for someone who resided in such a remote location. Perhaps a well? Irons wondered. Well, yes. Clear well, round back. Then go, no food." And then she slammed the door with greater vigor than Irons thought possible for such emaciated arms. There were all manner of odd people in the world, and isolation made such persons stranger still. But his unease remained, and he had yet to put his finger on the cause. Keeping his hands visible, though there was no other window from which to observe him, Irons walked around the cabin and did find, to his surprise, a hand pump some 10 feet from the structure. It, too, seemed to be in as dreadful a state as the cabin, but after some small protest, produced clean water. He glanced at the cabin, still seeing no means by which he could be observed. He looked away into the valley's growing shadows, even casting a quick glance up to the valley's rim. He removed a glove and touched a finger to the water and smelled it. Nothing. He tasted it, then waited. Within a few moments there was a shift in his balance, and he had to broaden his booted feet and catch himself with a hand upon the well. The world righted after several moments, but a mild nausea and unbalance persisted. Now Irons scowled toward the cabin from under the black brim of his hat, the unease of his stomach replaced with open suspicion. He cranked the pump again several times, as if filling a canteen, then let it stop, waited a moment, and sat down heavily, an unimpressed expression on his face as he drew one of his flintlocks. The soft rummaging inside the cabin stopped for a moment, as if the occupant were listening. Then the movement resumed, along with singing. Strangely beautiful, haunting singing, though the language was, Irons could not be sure, something akin to Russian. The rummaging became a collection of sounds. There were multiple people inside, some walking on bare feet, some... No, the noise was strange, confused. The front door opened. Michael Irons stood and aimed his pistol. Legs appeared. Too many legs, too close together. He called them legs because they walked, but they were not legs, they were arms. Human arms walking on hands. And above they were all collected, congealed, and packed together like a bouquet. But instead of a collection of stems, there was a single vase-shaped body of flesh, meshed together, packed together, as if the skin of a dozen corpses had been forced together like disparate pieces of clay crushed into unwilling unity. An eye, lidless, jostled and stared out from its fixed, bulging position within the folds of skin. The unholy amalgam scuttled toward Irons with swift and unbroken purpose. The thing saw him. It did not make a noise. He did not believe it capable. It did not pause or hesitate. No, it moved toward him, unconcerned and indifferent to his active readiness. Thinking quick, Irons drew his great sword to his left hand and, as quiet as he could, cut clean through the approaching monstrosity so that its eye was cut in half on the horizontal. The cut piece did not fall away, and after a moment the wound sealed as if it had never been, while the thing moved as if nothing had happened, its hands seeking, patting, grabbing at his boots and pants and cloak. Irons cleaved through the thing lower, severing 3 of the 24 arms at once. The amalgam did not seem impeded, and dragged him from his feet, clutching more and more of him and dragging him toward the cabin's door. The hands he had severed grabbed about blindly, some gripping his sleeve or arm in unseeing, unhelpful servitude. Now dragged close to the cabin, Irons swallowed hard and forced himself to cease. The singing had continued, and the thing was dragging him rather than killing him. He was pulled toward the door, and the unease Irons had experienced before was explained. The smoke's smell. He had been smelling cooked human flesh. Organs and intestines already prepared had been hung about the small cabin like sausages in the market, and something was being turned and basted over an open fire. Irons diverted attention from the open meat locker to save himself further identification. The flesh-eater turned from her cooking as one might to see what the dog had fetched. Irons did not allow her eyes to even register he was awake, and cleaved her head from her shoulders with such violence his great sword became lodged in the door-frame. The hands went limp the moment the song stopped, and the head fell from the decrepit body soon after, blood thickly pulsing from the collapsed body's neck like a toppled bottle of liquor. With a sigh, Irons relaxed for a moment. Then the bubbling pot and the scent of the smoke reminded him to further action. Disgusted, he got to his feet and retrieved his blade. Examining the water spout of the pump, Irons found the well itself had not been poisoned. Rather, whatever narcotic the cannibal had used was wrapped in cloth and wedged just inside the faucet. Impossible to see unless sought, and easily removed when well known. He took this away, pumped water to flush any potential contaminant, and tested again. Finding it clean, he filled his water pouch and canteen. Then he gathered the severed pieces of the flesh amalgam, and, after a careful examination to ensure nothing else had been missed, Irons uprooted a dry scrub brush and tossed it into the cabin's active fire. The fire caught, spread, and before long, the entire structure was engulfed.